A very warm welcome to the PRCA MENA Weekend Collective. Firstly, thank you for taking out the time to come on here and support our PRCA MENA Young Lions.
Thank you. Okay. I've prepared a deck. Um, it's not going to be too exciting, but rather kind of like the basics of Earned Creative. Um, and also maybe some learnings and some ideas on not only how to think, but also how to present. So I'm going to try to keep it fairly short, and hopefully relatable. Um, I think who said that? Was it Einstein that if you can't explain to a 6-year-old what you do, you don't understand yourself. So I will try to explain, in the simplest way possible. And so maybe we start here. This is my attempt to explain, what we do and what our industry is, to a 6-year-old. Um, and it's really what creativity and marketing works just the same way that any ecosystem on Earth works. And so all ecosystems in the world is built on the principle of mutual value. So this is an example of that. Take the apple tree. The apple tree is a small ecosystem. And the only thing that the apple tree wants is to create another apple tree, right? And so in order to do that, the apple tree creates a fruit around the seeds so that the birds and the people pick the fruit and help spread the seeds, right? That's good for the tree, but it's also good for the birds. So that's the principle of mutual value. That's why that's a working ecosystem. And that's also how creativity works and how marketing works. It's always built on the principle of mutual value. We have to create something that's good for us, but also good for the audience. And I think if you only ask yourself one question, if you only have one filter to evaluate your ideas, it should be this. Are we creating mutual value? So that kind of leads us to a good starting point, I think, for how to relate to what we do. Because it's easy to think that our job is to create awareness, and that's typically, what we do, right? And because we think that if we create this awareness, that will generate value for our clients. But in fact, it's the other way around. Our job is to create value because value always generates awareness. So think like the apple tree, when you're developing your ideas, and that's typically a good start. But how do you create value? In earned creatives, it's typically about finding the connective tissue between the brand or the company and the real world, or the zeitgeist, or the culture, current events, whatever is going on in the world. So this very simple model is called the earned model, and it's been around for many years, and it's pretty generic. But I find it very helpful, and I still to this day, and I've been doing it for many, many years, as you can see in my face. I still use this very simple model when I set up ideas in presentations because it's a very simple way of like leading the client by the hand through the thinking and to the idea. So I'm quickly going to go through, the basics of this model. So starting with the context, the first question any journalist asks herself when writing a piece of news is, why is this interesting now? Why is this relevant now? What does it relate to? What's the context? You know, Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything relates to something else. So in order for us to be credible and relatable and relevant, we need to connect our idea or our the brand that we work for to a context, to something in the real world, right? So to give you an example, if you work with health and health has been the growth driver for the PR and marketing industry now for many years. And many brands, they have a direct or an indirect relationship to health. So if you want to be relevant within that space, you need to understand what health is to people. So this is a bit of a Western perspective, but hopefully, it will make sense. In in the 70s, if you were to be relevant in health, in the 70s, health was pretty much about fruit and vegetables and what you ate. This was the time of Linus Pauling, the guy who's connected to vitamin C, the only person who won the Nobel Prize 2 times. So health in the 70s was very much about vitamins and nutrients. Then in the 80s, there was a new phenomenon called jogging. People started running. This was the first time in the history of mankind where people was actually running without nothing chasing them. So in the 80s, with jogging and gymping and Jane Fonda, suddenly health was more exercise and what you did with your body. In the 90s, we had a big global economic crisis, and in the West, people started to look for answers elsewhere, and alternative medicine and Chinese medicine and goji berries. That was really, on top of people's minds in terms of health. That turned into yoga in the 2000s, still a big thing. Yoga turned into this idea of happiness around 2010. Around 2010, the concept of happiness was very closely connected to health. Uh, then we started reading the articles about, solving the puzzle of life and death, and, the first person to be 200 years old is already born, and that kind of stuff. Then suddenly COVID hit, and mental health was really at the heart of the discussion. Um, you know, then that turned into the idea of inclusion and disparity and gender equality. Uh, Now with Ozempic, what's dominated the health debate for the last couple of years has been, new medications. And who knows what's around the corner. So maybe this was a long, boring example, but I think it's important to spend some time to really land that thought that everything changes over time. There is no constant in this world. So if you work with health, you have to understand what health is now. It's a moving target. But this is also something that I use when I present ideas. Maybe you've thought that, I made a convincing argument now, but I'm not an historian. I was just giving like an overview of themes and trends within the health and wellness space. It's not science, but when I use front covers of Time magazine, it feels true, right? Like it's like, yeah, it's like a nodding heads in the room. So that's a good tip for you when you present your idea in Cannes. Whenever you probably need to find something in culture, something in current events, something in the zeitgeist that you're connecting your idea to, and how you prove that, that this is a thing now, or everyone is talking about yoga or whatever it is. Just Google some front pages of some prestigious magazine and have it up there as validation to get people on board with your idea. It's just a presentation tip. Okay, so understanding the zeitgeist is one part of the equation, but it's not enough because if we're only chasing trends, if we're only chasing culture, we're not going to add any value. So remember, you have to think like the apple tree. And in fact, I think this is a very sobering stat from a couple of years ago from Reddit. I don't know if you follow Matt Klein. He's the head of insights at Reddit. He typically has some good perspectives on marketing and culture in general. And they did a study that shows that two-thirds of all people think that brands try too hard. So that's something I typically uh, inform my clients too, that we're not just newsjacking or trying to, put our brand, whenever we get the chance, because then we're just polluting the space. People will not appreciate our effort. We're not adding any value, and we're not going to win anyone over. Remember, two-thirds of all people think that brands try too hard. So we need to, uh, whenever we choose to engage or relate to something, we need to do it in a meaningful way. It's kind of like you're all very young. Maybe someone on this call knows who Groucho Marx is, but for my parents' generation, there were some big comedians in the U.S. But Groucho Marx, he was also like a thinker and a thought leader, and I think this is a good joke. But it actually represents, our industry in a lot of sense. I have my principles. If you don't like them, I have others. And in a way, that's how a lot of agencies serve clients, right? That, we have our ideas. If you don't like them, we'll give you others. And I think it's an important lesson to us, in terms of consulting in general, that, we need to provide recommendations to our clients rather than ideas. But here, I think it's more to don't just follow trends or chase culture. You have to have a point of view. Every brand needs a point of view and something that they believe in, and it's our job to help them express that. So you don't want to be, if in business school they say that there's basically two branding schools. You have the American branding school, which is ask the consumer what she wants and then sell her that. And then you have the European branding school, which is more ask our R&D department what we're good at doing and then try to sell that. And I think we're getting to a space now where consumers and people in general expect brands and companies to have a point of view and not just trying to please everyone. And just think about your own life. Like if you want to make a new friend, you don't walk up to someone in a bar and say, "What do you want me to talk about?" Like that's not how you make a friend. Like you have to provide some value. You have to have a point of view. You have to have something to talk about yourself, right? And it's the same thing for brands. So yes, it's important to understand culture, to relate to culture, to current events or to trends and tap into them. But we also need to have our own point of view. And that's the other side of the equation. What is it that we bring that creates something of value? So how do you figure out what it is that this brand that you're working on, what they do, or what is the value that they provide? So this story, I'm sure you've heard the origin story of Airbnb, one of the darlings of the new economy. It was this email on the left here that started Airbnb. It was basically there were two guys in San Francisco. They had a room to spare. There was a design conference in town, and they wanted to make $20. That's how Airbnb started. And they had, but that's not a super engaging or iconic brand story, right? Uh, yeah, I want to join that company, those two dudes with the air mattresses, they wanted to make $20. That's where I want to spend my career. But fast forward 10 or so years, their brand platform is, they imagine a world where you can belong anywhere. That's a beautiful brand platform. It has nothing to do with the origin story, but that doesn't matter. I think that's an important lesson that branding is always retrofitting. Branding is about coming up with the most engaging, relevant, interesting story of all that this company could be or should be, not where it comes from or where it was originally. Branding is retrofitting. And when you think about it, retrofitting is the only way to live. For some reason in Western culture, retrofitting has a bad name, but it's actually how, most people work. You think about your childhood. A typical childhood is filled with angst and filled with darkness and bullies and tough times and insecurity and crazy family members and weirdness. But when most people think, when they remember their childhood, it's always like it was a sunny day. I was out, fishing with my dad or something. Because the only way that we can survive and make peace with ourselves and make sense of the world is that we retrofit the idea of ourselves. We have this idea and this story that we basically made up about who we are or what our childhood was like. But for most people in the world, childhood is really tough. Still, we find a way to, make peace with it and go on. And it's the same thing with brands. You need to retrofit a story that makes sense. So this you can call a Vuja Day. I don't know if you heard that concept before, the concept of a Vuja Day. It's deja vu backwards, right? We all know what a deja vu is. Deja vu is that weird sensation where you suddenly feel that you've experienced something before, right? Vuja Day is the opposite. Vuja Day is when you walk into a situation you've been 100 times before and suddenly see something new, right? That's a Vuja Day experience. And that's the experience I try to have with all my brands. All the clients that I work for, I want to have a Vuja Day experience. I want to look at their brand and their business. I want to be in a situation I've been 100 times before with them. And certainly they've seen their own business 100 times before, but I want them to see something new, to have a new perspective on what it is that they do and the value that they provide. So to give you an example, this was a big brand, a few years ago. It was the first free newspaper that was handed out in public transport. This was actually a Swedish company, but it was in most cities all over the world. And I remember, I was young and I was doing a workshop with the leadership team for Metro. And I was very nervous. They were really, tough, hard-hitting business people. And the chairman of the board was there, and the CEO, and all like the entire management team. And so we started the workshop, and I asked them, "What business are you in?" And it was this awkward silence, and I thought I would be, kicked out of the room. But then the CEO said, like, "Well, we're actually in the democracy business because before we started handing out free newspapers, only middle class and upper class people read the morning news. We're actually in the democracy business." And then a board member said, like, "Well, we're in the sustainability business because before, when we started handing out free newspapers, we needed recycling, stations. And that was really the system that we built. Now all newspapers are recycled, but we created that system." Another person said, like, "Well, I'd say we're in the morning business. That's really our time of the day." Someone else said, "We're in the telling the short story business because all the stories in our newspapers are short. And, that's really what we do best." Someone else said, "We're in the urbanization business because, we exist in more urban areas than any other brand in the world. And urbanization is the biggest movement of our time. That's really what the business that we're in." But you get the idea, just with a simple, stupid question like that, what business are you in? if you try to have a Vujade experience, you will come up with a lot of different interesting answers. But if you accept face value and you say like, what do you mean? We're in the newspaper business. You're gonna miss out on so many opportunities for how to communicate, for how to develop new services, for how to brand, for how to recruit, all of these things. So I really encourage you, like whenever you get the briefing can, whenever you understand the brand that you're going to work for, ask yourself, what business are they in? And try to come up with a list of 10 different things. And it's a good exercise. And I'm sure that you're going to come up with very interesting alternative ways of describing what they do. And when you get to that idea of what they do, that vujade, you want to turn that into a platform that can live over time. And one good example of that is Arabian Nights, or 1001 Nights, uh, which is probably the most famous example of a frame story. A frame story is a technique in literature to basically create a platform enabling the author to tell many different other stories. So the frame story in 1001 Nights, of course, is Scheherazade telling a new story to the cruel ruler every night so he won't kill her, right? And through that frame story, we get to know Sinbad the Sailor and Aladdin and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves and all those iconic stories. They all come from the same frame story about Scheherazade. And it's the same thing with branding and creating a brand platform. You want to create that frame story that allows you to come back to your audience with new versions of that story or new ways of bringing your brand to life. But in closing, I think it's this. And really what earned creative is and how it's evolved over the last 10 or so years is that we need to create ideas that will survive in the jungle and not in the zoo. And this was the principle that we had in the Cannes jury last year with, where Khaled also were participating. And just a simple question to ask yourself, will this idea survive in the jungle without artificial support? Because let's face it, most marketing, the only reason it survives is because we're feeding it with paid media. It's not interesting enough, it's not engaging enough to survive without artificial support. So that's why they belong in the zoo. But from in the PR world or working with earned creative, you should always ask yourself if this idea is relevant enough, if it's an interesting enough vujade, and also if it connects to culture and current events enough to stand on its own two legs. So that was a short introduction to, the basic elements of earned creative and hopefully also some ideas on how you can build your presentation in Cannes.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's amazing. Thank you so much for that, Tom. That was brilliant. Fala, I'm gonna leave it to you. Sorry, I interrupted you. I just had to come on and say how wonderful that was.
Oh, no, I mean, clearly, I'm a skinny guy, but a very thick skin. So please push back, ask questions. You can be as candid as you want. And I think overall, that is really the purpose of Cannes, is to be exposed to ideas and thoughts and thinking, and then make up your own mind, and get inspired and maybe add some elements to your repertoire, but never, take things from face value. And like the industry is filled with people who looks like me, who think that they've solved it and have ideas on, how everything works. And I encouraged you to go to Cannes with an open mind and come back with a new idea of what is a benchmark or what is best practice, but make sure that you mix it up with your own perspective and your own thoughts and your own methods and your own kind of person.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom. I think that was very insightful and definitely very helpful to our PRC MENA Young Lions winners for 2026. And I'm sure it's going to help them a lot when they get again. Now, from the jury's lens to the winner's side, we're very glad to have Judy, Bakieh, and Sarah Alsalem with us, the PRC MENA Young Lions and Cannes Young Lions gold winners for 2023. And they will be sharing a bit of their experience from inside the competition. So, Judy and Sarah, over to you guys.
Yeah, so I thought I would kind of take the perspective of things that I wish I knew before going to Cannes, since obviously we've been in your shoes, newbies. We were so excited and scared and everything that you guys are feeling. One thing that I think I should start with is block out the noise. Now, what does that mean? There's two noises that will happen for sure with you guys when you get to Cannes. First one would be is when you're in that briefing room, all right? And when you're in that briefing room, you're going to be sat down with people from all over the world, all right? And you're going to have France and you're going to have Netherlands and you're going to have Mexico and Colombia and all of these people, and it's going to be overwhelming, all right? You're going to think to yourself, I am with the best in the world. There's people from all of these countries. They're the best in the world. You will feel overwhelmed. All right. People will start asking questions. You will start thinking to yourself, why didn't I think about that? And so on and so forth. Block out that noise. All right. Concentrate on the brief. Make sure you're listening to everything that they're saying. Take down notes and hints and block out that noise and block out anything that makes you kind of deviate from the goal, which is the brief at hand and understanding as much as you can. And just pretend they're not there, all right? This is you. You're in the office. You're doing your own thing. So that's number one. Block out the noise for sure. Now, the second noise that you will definitely get is after you get your idea and you're excited and everything, some doubts are going to creep in. All right. And that is normal. That is normal that after midnight, when you guys are tired and when everything kind of, everything, you start questioning everything, you will feel some doubts. Make sure that you have your idea in place and that you understand why the idea works and you believe in it and be each other's support system in this. I remember Sarah and I had different moments where we both kind of collapsed. You need to be the water to her fire and so on. You need to balance each other out and you need to make sure that you understand that your idea works based off of a framework, which brings me to my second tip. Have a framework. All right. So I think what worked really well for Sarah and I is that we had worked together several times before. And it was in our first radio, but like obviously it was a bit different. But what we had done is that we had practiced the way we think. All right. So we had a framework of how to go from brief to idea to great idea. And then, yes, finally, always compliment your partner. Do not duplicate the works. Make sure that you guys already know who's working on what. Sorry, Sarah, up to you.
No, I wanted to jump in and say like it's how important it is that you guys really, really work off of each other and like support each other along the way. Like Judy said, there were so many times where she would collapse, but I would be okay, and then vice versa. So make sure that you're not in the same like position at the same time so that you can keep holding yourselves each other up. And throughout it, it's a wonderful experience. I think you guys can both divide and conquer different things. So if you guys get the brief, I mean, luckily you've already gone through a difficult brief and you've won it. So you've already practiced that way, but you will have to, do the research. Someone else is already starting on that framework that Judy was speaking about and practicing ahead of time. I think I wanted to touch base a bit about like actually presenting and when you're in that room, because yeah, Judy mentioned when you're, getting the brief, but I think something else is when you're in that room with a room full of judges that is actually a very small and tiny room that I did not expect. It can feel overwhelming or intimidating, but you need to go in there and really, believe in your idea. Why am I saying believe in your idea? Because if you don't believe in it and if you're not convincing to the judges, they won't be either. They won't believe in it either. I think Judy and I took a really big risk with our idea, but because we believed in it, we did make history and win. So this is just something I want to tell you guys. You have a limited time to present when you're in that room, so make sure whatever you say is impactful and really serves your campaign idea.
I'm just going to touch on that. I'm just going to touch on that because it's super important. I cannot stress this enough. Guys, when you go into that room, you are performing. You are performing. You're putting on a show. But on top of that, you are believing in your idea wholeheartedly, as Sarah was saying, because you have done all the background, like all the work from literally knowing the smallest thing, knowing who's in the room. You need to understand that the person responsible for the NGO is going to be in that room, right? You are talking to him. You need to convince him. He knows his audience. He's probably tried several things before that haven't worked. He doesn't have a budget. He wants something that he can do tomorrow. So everything that you should be saying should kind of tailor towards that. Don't stress on going too big and too crazy. That's not really what people want to hear. You know this from your clients. If you tell them, I'm going to bring you the moon, they're like, okay, but how do I get the moon, right? We don't have the budget for it. It's super important to understand that. So always make sure that you guys are actually doing something that's feasible and something that the client knows would work because you guys have studied the audience and done your due diligence. And I need to say something like one key thing that I think was a seller for us when we won was that we had literally gone into the fine print of the NGO. Sarah caught something that was super smart in the fine print, and that was kind of the angle that we used in our campaign, which means you need to go into the nitty-gritty of your brief, things that you might think is not important. It literally takes one word to kind of spark an idea.
Yeah.
So do your due diligence really well, study the tone of voice, go into every single piece of information that you have, understand the brief and your client, understand what they're saying, what they want, and who we're speaking to before you do anything. Because if you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know what to do, right? And then as Sarah was saying, you go into that room, you believe in your idea, and you put on a show for them. You make them believe it as much as you do.
Thank you so much, Judy and Sarah, not just for the win, but for breaking down your entire experience. I'm sure there's a lot that Alaa and Jana, and including myself, have learned. Hopefully, I can be at the Cannes Lion next. But we're going to build on that by putting those realities back to the jury. So joining us are now Alaa and Jana, the winners of 2026. They'll be taking the floor to ask the questions many in the room are probably thinking. So Alaa and Jana, over to you guys.
First of all, thank you so much. Jana, you want to go on?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone here. Thank you for taking this much time out of your day to help us, to teach us, to tell us about your experiences. Tom, thank you so much for the presentation. It's very insightful. I noted down so many things that I think would be helpful, even not just in Cannes, but in other things. So we really appreciate the overview that you gave us. It made a lot of things more clear in terms of presenting and the insights and everything. At Gambit, we're already very insightful. So yeah, and for Judy and Sarah, thank you so much for the advice you gave us because I felt like that comforted me and Jana more than actually pressuring us. Because every single advice you gave us, looking back at how we worked together, we were already there. We were deconstructing the brief really well. We were looking at the insights. We looked at each and every aspect of the website, of the socials, of everything, and even the team dynamic between me and Jana, even if at some point we clashed in terms of ideas. We handled that really well and we made sure that we're uplifting each other instead of just like going back and forth. No, I want to do this, you want to do that. So that was really nice. Thank you, guys.
Alaa, you definitely speak for both of us. Thank you all so much for being here and for making us feel this supported. Never in our lives did we expect to be here, but we are so proud and we're so ready to take on Cannes. and everything you guys have shared with us has been incredibly insightful. So maybe Alaa, if you'd like to get started, if you have any questions.
Okay, so I definitely do have questions for both Tom and the winners, whether it's Judy or Sarah. One thing I would like to ask Tom maybe is that what are like the top things that judges look out for? I know the brief addresses the objectives, it has the asks, it knows what we're expected to do. But as a judge, beyond the brief, what is something that you would look at when two competitors are presenting?
So Cannes is about ideas. And in any jury room, whether that is for Young Lions or, any Cannes category, the first question in the room is what is the idea? And you want to be able to summarize the idea in one or two sentences. So that's the one thing. Then of course people will start evaluating that idea. Is it unique? Is it, engaging? Is it interesting? But make sure that you are laser focused on the idea and that you can actually summarize it, fairly quickly. The second question is typically, how does it relate to the brand? Is this an idea that makes sense for this brand? Do they have license to speak? Is this in their tone of voice? Is this something I expect from this brand? Do they have, a track record, in this space? What makes them the sender of this message? The third question is typically, like any journalist will ask, why is this interesting now? What's in culture or what's in the trend that you relate to? And, why should I care about this now? So those are the three questions that most juries will ask themselves. What's the idea? Does it connect to the brand? Why is it relevant now? And then, further down the list, there's going to be, thoughts about execution and craft and design and implementation and kind of the nitty-gritty, which is, important to have, of course. But the key questions are more on the conceptual level. Then, it's in PR, sometimes the insight is the idea. And I think it's important to spend some time trying to find a unique, unexpected insight, and build your idea around that. So that's something that PR juries are looking for as well.
I have a question to add on this. I understand definitely we've gone over insights a lot, but I was wondering what would make a culturally specific insight travel well at a global scale?
That's a good question. I mean, there are insights and contexts on many levels. Some relate to a culture or a local, phenomenon or a trend or something happening in a city. And then there are more universal insights on that is about, consumer behavior or, human truths. And typically the holy grail is to get to a human truth, something that we can all relate to and engage in, and something that's true about the nature of how we work. But it's difficult. I think it's a good question, and it's a question most global companies are asking themselves. How do we make sure that we have, global consistency, but also local relevance? It's a tricky one.
So I'm just going to jump in quickly, guys, just to open this up to everyone, to all the other judges as well. I think Claire has her hand up. And David, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in and add. Jamal as well, please. Claire, please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to comment on that last question. I think that was an excellent question. You are going to be in a global context, and you are going to be competing with, many other ideas, but many other, socioeconomic type, propositions. And this particular exercise will need a lot of cultural context, and you may So this maybe also goes into what I wanted to talk to you about, which is, how you start and how you end. I'll get back to the start part at the end. Let's go straight to the end because you're going to be also in a situation where you're going to have to, you're basically up there selling. And, everyone knows that in the sales process, you're going to come up against objections, which are going to be in the form of questions, and how you answer them is going to, how your theory stands up. And the way you're going to be queried is, there's going to be all the typical questions, which is, how are you going to execute this? This is a great idea, but are you going to fall through on implementation? Is your budget realistic? Are your KPIs realistic? What value are you bringing, to go back to what Tom was saying earlier? And I'm sure you're confidently going to be able to answer that. And just to go back to the opening, so first of all, congratulations. It was really great, reading your presentation and then seeing you do the pitch. You had lost me a little bit at the beginning of your pitch because you both came on. I don't know if it was a little bit formulaic, and hopefully you have a lot of time now to practice. And to go back to what Judy and Sarah said, getting your personality and your charisma to shine will be very important, because juries do not want to see well-rehearsed scripts. They want to see passion, they want to see confidence, and at the end of the day, what they're looking for is to have that trust, so earn trust. So just really practice on letting that personality shine, and the girls have given you amazing advice about not being nervous.
Thank you so much, Claire.
I just wanted to, I guess, reflect on some of the really great things that have put you in this position with your initial submission. Just to remember, as you go to Cannes, I think Tom pointed it out nicely in his presentation that, great creative idea needs to create mutual value. And I think, with your hands-on, gloves-off campaign, you really did that, because it was kind of a sensitive area as well, but your idea was not patronizing. It was actually about creating a level playing field. And I think that was what was lovely about it. So there was an emotional intelligence there that I think will definitely serve you well, whatever the brief that comes. And I got the sense definitely you saw the ideas through the prism of the audiences that you were trying to serve. I really felt that. And I think, again, that whatever comes next, I think will be very powerful. Tom also pointed out, the ideas that can live in a jungle, really great ideas. They don't have, there's no time limit on them. In fact, I think very often you are trying to create an idea that's a machine and that can live long into the future, and even spin out into to other ideas. So I think whatever you design, don't think of it as, this is my 1 year mandate or whatever. Just think of something that can live and breathe long beyond that. People have spoken a lot about the insights. I think you found some really good insights, but it's so important. So many people rush that bit and come up with a very generic insights upon which you can build, in my view, very, very little. So that's a key foundation. In terms of presentation, I think Claire had a point. I think you got into it, and I thought you both were very, very credible in the way you presented. I think the more you relaxed, actually, and the more you were listening, you were very confident in the idea, and I think that came across. And I guess the final point is really defending your idea. You'll have some tough questions. That's just inevitable. But the way that you triage difficult judge questions and the belief that you demonstrate in your idea, I think, is going to be a huge factor in how well you do. But look, I think there were so many clever, really thoughtful elements in the initial submission that put you in this rather wonderful position. I think if you can just carry through those same virtues, you will do extremely well. But that's all I had to say.
Thank you so much, David. You're actually on the way of us asking the same question you ended on. Something me and Jana are actually very curious about is to know, how did we both stand out out of all the other entries. I assume you guys were going through 27 entries. And of course, we want to focus on these strengths in order to keep them with us and take them with us to Cannes. And of course, we want to know what the weakness was so we can work on it. So it would be really nice if you and Claire maybe can tell us what made us stand out and what would make us stand out even more in terms of addressing the weaknesses and the strengths.
Claire, do you want to go first?
Okay. Look, what stood out was it was a very well thought through presentation, and I've been judging for 2 years now. You know, relatively new to the judging, but I have been doing a lot over the last 2 years, and I've probably seen 100 different case studies for awards, and I've done a few rounds on this Cannes. What tends to come through, and there's not many, when you're judging, for example, this round, there was 28 to 30 submissions. So, and we're quite busy people, so we usually tend to block an afternoon off and then we go through all the presentations. And after a few, you tend to see the same pattern. And I've spent most of my career on the client side, so I see a lot of this stuff and I have my client hat on, and it's typically, okay, the idea is great, the presentation is very visually attractive, but realistically, this is going to fall flat when it comes to implementation. I'm being sold dust. And a lot of those presentations were like that, and yours didn't come through. It wasn't particularly pretty. It wasn't incredibly crafted when it came to the visuals. The first slide was you two on there. So at first I was like, oh, okay, two young girls. That was my first thing. I think you were number 12 or 14. So by that stage I was like, oh, I'm running out of time. However, what really, really made me take a note is that it was actually very maturely laid out. I had no idea it was Gambit, obviously, but I know now that I know, I can see the Gambit touch, because there's always this incredible, you talked about insights a lot, but it was just really well, it had depth to it. And the bottom line is it was implementable, and it wasn't patronizing. A lot of the presentations we saw, or the ideas we saw, were patronizing. And this one, I thought, we work with Middlesex University, we work with Abu Dhabi University, and I thought, this is actually doable. So, if I were David, I would have thought, okay, this works. When you presented, you came on a little bit very well rehearsed, very ready, but I was like, oh, I want to see the personality. And then it flowed, and then you handled all the questions at the end really confidently and beautifully. So I think there's depth to what you did, and it just shows to me that you know how to handle a brief, basically. So
yeah. Listen, I think you made a lot of the points I was going to make, but look, there was definitely, I think in 2 or 3 of the submissions for the award, I kind of went, yes, love it. And I had a very visceral, emotional reaction. I went, I really, and yours was at the top of that list. And I think it's because you had your own eureka moment and went, what about this? And when a team have come together and they've had that moment of really connecting insight to an idea, and to Claire's point, that it's actually deliverable. Because that's the other problem with a lot of the submissions, as you go, this ain't going to work with the best will in the world. That was it for me, is that I went, well done, because you've made that very difficult 2-step from a great insight to a great idea. And that's the step when many of them fell down, and you started to see fairly threadbare old PR ideas, just being layered on. But there wasn't that kind of, yes, I really, really get it. So for me, that was the big moment.
Thank you so much. Lovely hearing your guys' opinion on our presentation. We'll definitely keep those few comments in mind and make sure to work on our strengths so we can become stronger, and work on those weaknesses in order to strengthen them.
Can I, sorry, just make one more point, which I forgot, which is these judges are hard-nosed. and they might be quite unsmiling. And so it's not that you want them to like you. You want to like your idea, and that's an entirely different thing. So it's just presenting you as we are the brain power, we're the brain trust behind this work. And like us because we're very good at what we're presenting rather than just wanting them to like you for your person.
Yeah, it's the trust factor. So that, there has to be, again, to go back to what Tom said, the value, very important. And that's you giving them a solution to their challenge, but them trusting you. You have to be an easy pick.
Can I just add a question here to Tom? And that is, in your mind, Tom, as the jury president, obviously you've gone a level. It's a level deeper where the judges, you've discussed what they're all looking for, and that's what you're sort of presiding over. What do you think are let's say the top three things that Jana and Alaa should sort of look out for? What the judges will be really looking for?
It's a good question. Again, Cannes is about ideas, and you need to do your due diligence. Like whenever you come up with an idea, and I know, they say in journalism, never check a good story. But it's important. It's important in the awards game because there's so many ideas out there, and so make sure that you have your own new unique way of cutting the cake. If you have an idea that you believe in that will move needles, and you feel that it's more than an idea, it's really a recommendation. Even if it's been done before, you have to ask yourself, like, then how do we turn it into a more relevant version of something that's already been done? And just that's true for music too. Like sometimes, you love an original song. Sometimes you love the cover version better than the original. And that's true for ideas too. Like it doesn't have to be never seen before. But if it's an idea that we've seen before, I have to ask myself, is this a covers version I would want to listen to, or is the original better? So that's important with any idea. I think another question is this: everyone is looking for the big idea. Too few people are looking for the whole idea, which is different. So what I mean is that when you find a big idea, you should ask yourself, how can I bring this to life in the most relevant way? How can I make this idea all that it could be or should be? How does it relate to all the key stakeholders? What is the most relevant way to bring this to life in, these channels? So you don't stop at, this shiny object, but make sure that you show the jury that you're not just smart and innovative with coming up with the idea, you also have the knowledge and craftsmanship to make sure how to implement and turn it into a whole idea. And that's, to me, that my experience is the difference between an idea and a recommendation is just that. I don't like ideas. I don't trade in ideas. Ideas are cheap. If I want ideas, I go to my kids, right? What I like is recommendations. I like someone to tell me, based on my experience, based on my abilities, based on my knowledge of your business, this is what I recommend you to do. It's very different from an idea. An idea is like something you get at a buffet, Maybe we do this, maybe we do that. What do you think? You decide. That's ideas. That's not worth anything. Clients don't hire you to come up with ideas. Clients hire you to come up with recommendations. And I think that's something that you should think about when you finalize your presentation is how do you turn this idea into a recommendation?
Thanks for that, Tom. And one last question for me, promise. It's just I wanted to sort of go a little bit deeper on this. It's I've got so many questions, but I think the one key one here is that, you know, and Claire's touched on this, and so has David. Um, what is what is going to move that needle? So, for example, is it like, I know we've talked about insights, we've talked about relevance. Does emotion come here anywhere?
Typically, emotion and craft, that's the X factor, in any presentation. I don't think it's at the heart of it. I would suggest the way to win a client over in any presentation or a jury is to take them by the hand, lead them down a narrow corridor, and lock doors behind them as you go. Right? And you lock a door behind them by agreeing on something, when you have the nodding heads in the room, right? So at some point, there's going to be a moment of doubt or when they don't believe you, but you can't allow them to escape the building. They can only escape to the last door you locked, right? So you want to walk with them. And it's like, we know that this is true, and you have the nodding heads, right? And then we know that this is true, and they're like, yes, that leads us here. And it's like, okay, yeah. So the build up is really important. The way I build up to ideas is I typically end with a list of requirements. So that's a list that you can make up, or you can even tailor it based on your idea. But typically, a list of requirements is, it's relevant to the brand. It makes sense for the audience. It can come to life in many different ways. It can live over time. These things that you want from most concepts. And then you pick, the requirements that makes the most sense for your idea. So you go through the list of requirements, and you have the client or the jurors like, yes, that makes sense. Then you present the idea. Then you go back to the list of requirements, and you know that you already ticked all of them. Then it's going to be very difficult for them to question the idea. So in any situation, whether that be with a client or with a jury, the number one enemy is opinions, right? Everyone's got opinions. Your job is to take opinions out of the equation. This is not about opinions. This is not about ideas. This is about our recommendation to you based on all these things that we already agreed on. These things that we saw in culture that you're going to show an example, with some headlines, or you always need to validate the things that you're presenting, but do it in a way that is telegraphic. Nobody wants to read a report or an essay. It's enough with kind of like what I did with that health thing. Show some covers from some magazines to validate, like, this is happening in culture. Get the nodding heads in the room. Make sure that you put a lot of emphasis on the build-up. When you present the idea, you should already have them, you should already, like, they should be very close to taking the bait.
I have one more question, if you guys don't mind. Okay,
Sure,
we
go
know
ahead.
there's only 5 minutes to present, and that's definitely nerve-wracking. There's so many ideas, so much amplification, strategies, insights that we all want to cram into 5 minutes. Where have you noticed in the past that people overinvest their time when it doesn't actually impact judging?
5 minutes is a long time. So you have to change your perspective.
Okay.
You only need 30 seconds to win someone over. So don't get nervous about, like, oh, we don't have much time. You have too much time. And you should only, you can't have a lot of words on a slide. One image and a good talk track. Something to just so for the jury to look at, but they're going to listen to you very quickly go through, like, this is true for you, this is true in culture. That means that we need to tick these boxes, and here's your idea, and here's how it comes to life. It's very simple. But the problem is that in a jury situation, like, you watch 500 case videos back to back.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's not just about the idea, it's about how you present the idea compared to all the other teams, right? So you need to make sure that you have a punchy, short, energetic prezo. But 5 minutes is more than enough.
I love it. Noted.
Look, the other thing is, Cannes you're there with the best and the brightest. Just soak it all in, really. Apart from, yes, I know that you want to come back with a win, but also just listen to all these brilliant minds. It's gonna really inspire you and change a lot of things.
Definitely. We're so excited.
So thank you so much, Alaa and Jana and everyone. As we wrap
Thank
up,
you,
I'd like to
guys.
start by thanking Tom for setting the tone with such a clear and generous session. A big thank you as well to our PRCA MENA Young Lions 2026 jury, Claire and David, for sharing their perspectives so openly. And thank you to Jamal for joining us today, but also for consistently backing and putting forward talent through platforms like this. And of course, to our 2023 winners, Judy and Sarah, thank you for giving us a real look at what it takes beyond the headlines. And to our 2026 winners, Alaa and Jana, you both, we wish you the very best. And we'll be watching closely, but more so, we'll be rooting more for you guys. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you're leaving with something you can take forward. More from PRCA MENA coming soon, and we look forward to having you with us again. Sorry, I think I missed
I don't want
that.
to hold it back. I was just going to say, like, first of all, thank you so much, Tom, for this, because I don't even know what time of day it is where you are, but I'm sure it's either very early or very late. But thank you for all of those tips. And thanks, Claire, and obviously David and everyone. Just for the people who are attending this as well, because obviously, like with Alaa and Jana, we work together. So and with Judy and Sarah, we worked together previously, so we have each other's audience. But for the people attending and thinking about this next year and the year after and so on, one mindset I think is so important. And it comes from a funny scene in a movie called Watchmen, where one of the characters goes to jail and he goes in there and there's all the jailmates and it's intimidating. And the first thing he says is, "I'm not in here with you. You're in here with me." And it's just switching completely the mindset. And I think that's the mindset to go to Cannes with, is not to go in intimidated by the competition, but rather to think,
I love that.
I'm not in here with you. You guys are in here with me. You're competing with me. And I think that extra level of confidence in terms of what you bring makes a big difference. We do have that in our region, and I know this in the last few years, we do have that mindset of, because in the big awards shows, a lot of the focus can be on the bigger Western agencies and the traditional powers in advertising, which has slowly been changing and becoming more democratized around the world. But you can go in sometimes slightly undermined, underwhelmed, feeling like, whoa, those are the winners of the US, those are the winners of Australia, those are the winners of Japan, and so on and everything. And I think because I noticed with Sarah and Judy, there was that mindset of these guys need to compete with us. We're not there to compete with them. It did change everything. And we took that forward in so much. And that's why we've won 3 of the past 4 MENA Young Lions. And that's why I think our region has won 2 of the past 3 Cannes Young Lions, because obviously Ranim and Yusuf won it last year from Burson. And so that's just my advice for everyone listening as well.
Amazing. Thanks,
Yeah,
Jamal. That's a great tip, actually. Yes, for a confidence booster. I think that's amazing. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Tom, especially, thank you for your time and your presentation and all your wonderful advice. Claire, thank you. Jamal, ladies, everyone, thank you so much. And I look forward to making this even bigger next year, so we can move on, and we can.
Bonne chance next month, ladies. We'll be watching.
Thank you.
Best of luck with that, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.